like a place frozen in time. I told myself I'd just look around for a minute and go back. But right when I took a few steps forward, I heard something, a quick tapping sound, like someone walking lightly across the wooden floor. I froze. The sound stopped too. I don't know why, but instead of running, I whispered, "Hello?" My voice felt too small for that hallway. There was no reply, yet the air around me felt strangely charged. I kept walking slowly, trying to convince myself it was just an old building settling. But then, to my left, something moved. It wasn't a full figure, more like a shadow slipping behind a doorway. It didn't feel threatening, but it felt aware of me. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. I took one more step, and suddenly the door at the far end slammed shut so hard the walls shook. That sound broke whatever courage I had left. I backed away quickly, almost tripping on the last stair. When I reached the bottom, the bar noise returned instantly, like nothing had happened. People were laughing, glasses were clinking, music was playing. It was like I had stepped out of a different world. As I walked out onto the street, I kept looking back at the windows on the upper floor. They were dark, still, and completely silent. I couldn't see anything staring out, but I could feel something was. And even now, every time I think about that moment, I can still hear that door slamming somewhere deep inside that old building. Like whatever lives there wasn't happy I showed up. 2. Old Candler Hospital, Savannah, Georgia. I had always been drawn to abandoned places, but Old Candler Hospital in Savannah was different. I didn't know much about it except that it was old, huge, and considered haunted. On that cloudy afternoon, I parked my car a few blocks away, staring at the building from across the street. It was massive, with cracked windows and peeling paint, yet there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. The air smelled faintly of rust and damp wood, and a chill ran down my spine as I walked closer. The main entrance doors were locked, so I went around to the side, where a broken service door hung on its hinges. As I stepped inside, the silence was thick, almost heavy enough to breathe. My footsteps echoed in the long hallway, each sound bouncing off the walls in a way that made me feel like I wasn't alone. I told myself it was just the building settling, but deep down, I felt eyes on me. Something about this place whispered stories I couldn't yet hear. I found myself drawn to the staircase that led to the upper floors. The steps creaked under my weight, each one a protest against my presence. At the top, the corridor stretched into darkness. I switched on my flashlight, the beam cutting through the dust and shadows. That's when I noticed the old hospital beds lined up along the walls, rusted and abandoned. I could almost imagine the patients lying there decades ago, waiting for help that never came. As I walked further, I felt a sudden cold draft pass through me. My hair stood on end. Then, I heard it, a faint whisper, almost like a sigh, coming from the far end of the hallway. My heart jumped, and I froze. The sound repeated, slightly louder this time, as if someone was calling out to me, yet no one was there. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, the hallway seemed to stretch even longer, darker than before. I wanted to leave, but curiosity kept me rooted. I turned a corner and saw what looked like a shadow move across the wall. My pulse raced, and I swallowed hard. It's just a trick of the light, I told myself. But then I heard footsteps behind me, soft, deliberate, following me. I didn't dare turn around. I quickened my pace, feeling the weight of the building pressing down on me, the whispers growing louder, echoing through the empty halls. When I finally reached the stairs to go back down, the air suddenly warmed, and the sounds faded, leaving nothing but silence. The front doors were still locked, but somehow I found myself outside, blinking in the sunlight, heart racing, drenched in sweat. I looked back at Old Candler Hospital, and I knew something had followed me in those halls, something invisible, yet very real. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can hear the faint whispers of patients long gone, calling from the dark corners of that abandoned hospital. It's a place that stays with you, long after you leave. 3. Bonaventure Cemetery, Savannah, Georgia. I had always heard stories about Bonaventure Cemetery in Savannah, but nothing could have prepared me for the moment I actually stepped inside. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the winding paths. The air smelled damp and earthy, a mix of moss and fallen leaves, and every step I took seemed to echo louder than the last. There was an uneasy quiet, the kind that makes your skin prickle and your mind start to imagine things that might not be there. As I walked past rows of old gravestones, I noticed the names were faded, worn by decades of weather. Some were children, their dates stopping too soon, and I felt a strange lump form in my throat. I told myself I was here to explore history, to photograph old architecture and statues, but part of me knew I was chasing something else, the whispers of the past that people spoke of in hushed tones. Then I saw her. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, a trick of the fading light, but the figure of a woman in white was standing at the far end of the path. She didn't move, just stared in my direction. My heart began to race, and my stomach twisted. I tried to tell myself it was someone else visiting, but no one else was around. I took a step closer, and as I did, a cold wind swept through the trees, rustling the leaves in a way that sounded almost like whispering. I raised my camera, trying to focus, and in that moment, she vanished. The spot where she had stood was empty, only the fog creeping along the ground. My hands shook as I lowered the camera, and I felt a sudden, inexplicable heaviness in my chest, as if the air itself was pressing down on me. I started walking faster, my eyes scanning every shadow, every corner, convinced she might appear again. The cemetery was beautiful, almost surreal, with grand statues and angelic figures that seemed to watch me as I passed. But the beauty was layered with a sense of sadness, of lives long gone yet somehow still present. I could feel it, the stories, the energy of the people buried here, the way the air seemed alive with memories. By the time I reached the main gate, night had begun to settle in. The streetlights outside felt almost harsh compared to the cemetery's quiet gloom. I kept looking back over my shoulder, half expecting to see the woman in white following me, but she never appeared. Still, even now, when I think about Bonaventure, I feel that same chill, that same weight of the past pressing on me. It's a place where you realize some stories never really end, they just wait, quietly, for someone to notice. 4. Rhodes Hall, Atlanta, Georgia. I had always been fascinated by old mansions, but Rhodes Hall in Atlanta felt different from the moment I parked outside. The Victorian architecture was grand, almost intimidating, with its tall towers and ornate windows. Even in daylight, the place gave me chills. I could almost feel the weight of its history pressing down, like every brick and carved statue was holding a secret. I decided to explore inside, carefully opening the heavy wooden door. The smell of polished wood mixed with dust hit me instantly. My footsteps echoed through the empty halls. At first, I tried to focus on the beauty, the high ceilings, the elaborate chandeliers, but it was impossible to ignore the silence. It was too deep. Almost unnatural, as if the building was breathing with me. As I moved further, I noticed faint sounds, soft giggles, almost like children playing, but the halls were empty. My heart started to race. I told myself it was just the acoustics, maybe some noise from the street outside. But then I heard it again, a slow, deliberate footsteps coming from the staircase ahead. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand. No one should be here, I reminded myself, yet every instinct screamed that I wasn't alone. I slowly approached the staircase, each step creaking under my weight. Shadows danced across the walls in strange shapes, and I swear I could see movement out of the corner of my eye. The laughter of children came again, soft and fleeting, then disappeared. My pulse was pounding so loud, I thought it would give me away to whatever was here. In the grand hall, I paused and looked around. One of the portraits on the wall caught my eye. It was of a young boy, staring directly at me. I felt a shiver crawl down my spine, a sense that the eyes were following my every move. I whispered, "Hello," and the room seemed to exhale. Then, from the staircase, I heard a faint whisper, almost a sigh, saying my name. Panic mixed with curiosity, and I walked toward the staircase, thinking maybe I could see who or what was there. But the moment I reached the bottom step, the laughter stopped. The building fell silent again, except for my own rapid breathing. I couldn't see anyone. It was like the place itself had been testing me, letting me get close, then disappearing. I left Rhodes Hall quickly, glancing back at the tall, imposing windows. Even as I drove away, I could still feel it watching me. Something about that house stays with you, not fear exactly, but the sense that its stories, its memories, and maybe even the spirits of the children, will always be there, just beyond sight. 5. The Pirate's House, Savannah, Georgia. I had heard about the Pirate's House for years, mostly stories. From friends and online legends, but nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced that night. It was an unusually cold evening in Savannah, and the streets were almost empty. When I walked up to the building, the wooden structure looked warm and inviting from the outside, with lights glowing softly in the windows. But as soon as I stepped through the door, the air felt different, heavier somehow, as if it carried centuries of whispered secrets. I wandered past the tables in the main dining room, pretending I was just there for a late dinner, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. The walls were lined with old portraits, maps, and pirate artifacts, all hinting at the building's long and violent history. It was easy to imagine the sailors, smugglers, and travelers who had once roamed these halls, and suddenly the legends about ghosts didn't feel so far-fetched. I decided to explore the back corridors and the tunnels that were said to run underneath the building. The air grew colder with every step I took. My flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I felt my heartbeat quicken as I moved further into the darkness, and I kept telling myself it was just my imagination. But then I heard it, soft, wet footsteps behind me, slow and deliberate. I froze, listening, but the sound stopped just as suddenly as it started. I continued cautiously, each step creaking against the old wooden floors. Then, a cold breeze brushed past me, carrying a faint smell of saltwater and rust, like the ghost of a sailor had just passed by. I shivered, and my flashlight caught something at the end of the corridor, a shadow that moved against the walls without a clear form. My pulse was racing, and for a second, I wanted to turn and run. But curiosity anchored me in place. I whispered, "Hello," softly, almost hoping for an answer. The silence that followed was so thick it felt tangible. Then, from somewhere deep within the tunnels, I heard a faint voice, almost a sigh, saying my name. My stomach dropped. I don't know why, but I felt compelled to follow the sound for a few steps. When I turned a corner, there was nothing, only the faint glow of my flashlight reflecting off the damp stone walls. I finally made my way back to the main dining room, my hands shaking and my heart pounding. The noise and warmth of the room felt almost surreal after what I had just experienced. I looked back at the hallway leading to the tunnels, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing there, watching me. But when I blinked, it was gone. I left the Pirate's House that night with a strange mixture of awe and fear, knowing that some stories aren't just legends, they are waiting quietly, in the shadows, for someone to notice.